Hello, everyone. Jerry Shockey here at the Pro Football Hall of Fame. I'm the Director of Youth and Education here at the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and we're excited to bring this program to you today. We're going to talk about the Kansas Comet's roommate. Some of you are like, wait a minute, who's the Kansas Comet? And some of you are like, I know who the Kansas Comet is. That's Gayle Sayers. Well, who's his roommate? Well, Brian Piccolo, and we're going to get to that here in just a moment. It's one of the programs we do. But what we're doing here is we're launching a number of our youth educational programs as a condensed 20-minute version. Typically, it's a 50 to 60-minute presentation we do, whether schools are here as a live audience when they come on field trips, or whether we connect out through video conferencing to a classroom of students where we can engage and talk and see them and share content and things like that. So what we thought we'd do with everyone being at home is create a number of educational resources that teachers can send home to their students, or parents can get in connection with these and share them with their sons or daughters. I've got two boys at home. I'm still working full time at the Hall of Fame, mostly from working from home, but also full-time teacher to both my boys, my third and sixth graders. So interesting resources like this are great opportunities to give an interesting perspective when we talk about different programs. What better way to use to captivate a young person's interest and use the game of football to teach science and math and social studies and all those kind of things. So we're going to do that here today. But before we do that, and we go into the program that we're going to talk about here today, what we always like to do is give a clear understanding of exactly who the Hall of Fame is and what it is that we do. And so one of the ways we do that is, first of all, just to show you guys where we're at. And so we are in Canton, Ohio. Here's a map for those of you that are tuning in across the country or all over the world. Here is a map that you can see here, and here's Canton, Ohio, about 60 miles south of Cleveland, Ohio. So if we zoom in, you will see the Pro Football Hall of Fame, our building. There's our building there. And if we go to the stadium right next to us, this is Tom Benson Hall of Fame Stadium. This is where the annual Hall of Fame game is played. This year is going to be the Dallas Cowboys playing the Pittsburgh Steelers on Thursday, August 6th. We have the enshrinement ceremony on Saturday, August 8th. We have a Concert for Legends on August 9th. And so we're still gearing up for that and getting ready for the NFL season to kick off here in Canton, Ohio. But this is where that all takes place. Now, what I want to do is switch screens here. We're going to jump into the Prezi. Now, every one of our programs has a Prezi that goes along with it. So as we're talking with students and interacting with them, we have a Prezi that kind of goes along with that. So you're going to see today's program is going to be Kansas Comet's roommate. We're going to talk about Gayle Sayers. We're going to talk about Brian Piccolo. We're going to do it in a very quick fashion, just kind of a quick overview. So we'll kind of skip past the videos that supplement the program just for the sake of time. But if you were to connect into one of these programs, there's videos, there's interaction that we do with the students. We really try to keep it engaging through video conferencing. But one of the ways we talk about the Hall of Fame is we have a more than a game video. Again, we won't be able to go into that, but it really talks about why football is more than a game, what it teaches about life, what are the character qualities it teaches. But our mission here at the Pro Football Hall of Fame, this is what we stand for. We honor the heroes of the game, we preserve its history, we promote its values, and we celebrate excellence everywhere. Our vision is not just the past, it's the future. So it's not just about all these bronze busts and past players. It's about you guys. It's our young people using the past to educate and inspire the future. It's not just about Canton, it's the world. So it's a message we want to take all over the world. And it's not just a great museum for football, and it is a great museum for football, but it's a message of excellence everywhere. Our values, what we believe football stands for, is commitment, integrity, courage, respect, and excellence. And so we'll skip over that here today just for the sake of time. But what we're here to talk about today is the Kansas Comet's roommate. And we're going to look at this story from two unique perspectives. One is historically, because they kind of broke a barrier in the NFL, being the first black-white roommate, but then also just the friendship that took place between Gayle Sayers and Brian Piccolo. And it was so captivating that there's actually a movie that was made about them that many of you might be familiar with called Brian's Song. It was done in the 70s and then redone in the 2000s, but I'm an oldie but goodie kind of guy. You know, you can't go wrong with James Caan and Billy D. Williams. So I like the old version the best. That's my favorite, but both are outstanding. But we're going to look at those two. And so let's just give you a quick highlight for those of you, the young people that might be tuning in, that might have no clue who either one of these players are. Gayle Sayers is running back for the Chicago Bears. He attended the University of Kansas, and in 1965 was drafted both by the NFL and the AFL. There are two rival leagues at that time. He was nicknamed, now get this, young people, is that if you got the nickname Comet, that means you're pretty fast. And that's exactly what Gayle Sayers was. He was pretty fast. And he was nicknamed the Kansas Comet. 1968, he tore all the ligaments in his knee. He was the first player to come back from this injury. He was inducted in the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 1977 at the age of 34, still the youngest ever to be enshrined in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. I'll show you this quick video.
Give me 18 inches of daylight. That's all I need.
The dynamic Gale Sayers was the NFL's equivalent of a shooting star. Bursting onto the scene in 1965, he won Rookie of the Year honors and tied the NFL's record for most touchdowns in a game with 6. Whether running off tackle, returning kicks, or catching a pass, he was a threat to go all the way every time he touched the ball. Sayers' career only lasted 68 games, but to many, he was the most picture-perfect running back of all time.
All right, so we see Gayle Sayers. Now we're going to look at Brian Piccolo. Now, Brian Piccolo attended Wake Forest University, where he led the nation in rushing, went undrafted. Now, that's an early sign in Brian Piccolo's character, and that's what we're really going to talk about here today, in addition to the historical elements, but the social implications of the story, but also just the character and the friendship behind it. If you can imagine leading the nation in rushing and then being undrafted. Most people, if you think of leading the nation in rushing, you probably think they'd not only be drafted, but maybe even drafted in the first round or maybe even the top 10 picks. But he was determined to make it in the NFL. So he's your typical Bears player. He was undersized but determined. So when he was also, when Sayers was injured, Piccolo was one of the ones who stepped in to start, and he's also one of the ones that helped Gayle Sayers rehabilitate. And the story goes that Brian Piccolo said, you know, I don't want to get the starting job by you getting hurt. I need to get you back so I can beat you outright. So kind of the insight into Brian Piccolo's character and his attitude and those things. So let me show you a quick video of this too.
Sayers was complimented by another strong setback, number 41, Brian Piccolo. Against Pittsburgh, he filled the air with footballs, firing a touchdown strike to number 41, Brian Piccolo, one of the toughest backs in the game.
Okay, all right, so look at those two. Now, some of you young people, you know exactly what this is. I'll give a pause for a second. Tell me what that is on the screen. What's that called? Something you use in school. That's right. It's a Venn diagram, where you use to compare and contrast. And so if we look at similarities between the two, you know, you could come up with all kinds of things. So I want you just for a second to think of some similarities between Brian Piccolo and Gayle Sayers. It could be that they're both men, you know, whatever similarities that are between the two. And I'll give a pause for a second as you think of those. But you're right, exactly. They both played football. They both played in the backfield. They both went to college. You know, all kinds of different similarities between the two of them. But then there's also a lot of differences, and that's what we're going to talk about here today. And the two biggest differences you see is, number one, the most glaring is obviously their skin color. They're both different color. So that's one, but probably just as equally glaring about the two, if you ever had the opportunity, if you had the opportunity to be around them both back in the 60s, is that their personality was just as different as the color of their skin. Where Gayle, and I've met Gayle and worked with Gayle and have been around him, very quiet, very reserved, just very chill, if you will, for a modern day term, if you will. Brian Piccolo would be your class clown, if you will, the prankster, the jokester, outgoing, you know, kind of just outspoken and things like that. And so when we look at that, first we look at their skin color, and to understand what was going on in our country during that time. And you can see those four little pieces of the pie, and you can kind of, when you see those, you can probably think about what those mean. But we're going to look at that here. What was going on in the 60s, and in the 40s, 50s, and 60s? You had a landmark court case, Brown versus Board of Education, that dealt with segregation in public schools. The result of that case stated that separate educational facilities are unequal. This led to unsegregated schools across the country. Okay, you had the Civil Rights Act of 1964. You had Rosa Parks, 1955, Martin Luther King Jr. in 1963, who was later assassinated in 1968. And so you have all these things that were taking place in our country's history with regards to race relations. And so, so how did Brian Piccolo and Gayle Sayers make history? And you probably already heard me say it. They became, in 1967, the first black-white roommates in the NFL. So before, as you can see there, before the 1967 season, began, executives from the Bears suggested that Sayers and Piccolo room together on road trips. Now, if you think about this in sports, whether it's in training camp or when you travel on the road, or high school sports or college sports, whatever. I mean, in practice, you divide by position. Running backs go work with with running backs. Offensive linemen go here. You always are typically broken down by position. Sometimes offense and defense, but very specifically. And so during that time, it wasn't unlikely that if you had a roommate or you're rooming together with a bunch of people, whether it's during preseason or training camp or whether travel on the road, you typically room by position because that's who you work with most of the time. And so for this to be suggested, it wasn't a big deal really to Brian and Gayle, but the social implications were the fact that they were going to be the first black-white roommate. And this would not only make them better teammates, but better friends as well. They became the first interracial teammates in the NFL. And so first of all is that they made history. Sport during that time was very impactful because it was so visible. Especially go back in the 1940s, football permanently integrated in 1946. You have probably the most popular story. If I were to ask you guys who's probably the most popular African-American player throughout history to break a color barrier in sport, you would probably say Major League Baseball, and you would say Jackie Robinson, and rightfully so, with the Brooklyn Dodgers. In 1947, Branch Rickey brought him up to play Major League Baseball. And so sport in many ways, especially in towns in the South that were heavily segregated, where, didn't eat in the same restaurants, didn't go to the same churches, didn't go to the same schools, just completely separated towns. In many cases, many, especially young white people, would never had even an encounter, an experience with an African American, and they were just taking in what they were taught by their family members and everybody else. And so, in ignorance, in many ways, is it probably had preconceived notions and said, well, this is what I've been taught, and this is what I believe, and as we know, it's wrong. And so what happened though in sport is that you could be in a heavily segregated town and then turn on your TV on Sunday to watch football or watch a Major League Baseball game, and all of a sudden in the 40s and 50s and 60s, you saw guys like Jackie Robinson or Marion Motley and Bill Willis. If you go in the 50s and 60s, you see guys like Jim Brown or Bill Russell in the NBA. You see these guys that were playing, whites and blacks playing on a team together and succeeding and winning and celebrating and laughing and crying. As we say, sport is the great equalizer. And if we think about this just for a second, we look at somebody like Patrick Mahomes, the quarterback for the Kansas City Chiefs who won the Super Bowl MVP. Patrick Mahomes does not care what color his offensive lineman is. What's Patrick Mahomes care most about his offensive lineman? Exactly. Can he block? And so what you saw is people looking past exteriors and just looking at, are you the best person for this job? And if you are, you're my teammate, you're my brother. And so you saw that this made this issue become very visible. And you saw these color barriers being broken down because sport is so visible. So sport played a critical role in the integration of our country. Have we made it completely yet? No, not by a long shot. There's still differences, not only based on color, but maybe on gender, maybe on socioeconomic status. We still have a long way to go. We need to continue looking for ways to unify as people, not judge people by their exterior. But certainly sport has played a really a major impact when we talk about the integration of our country. And Brian Piccolo and Gayle Sayers are part of that story, part of that breaking down color barriers, becoming the first interracial roommates. But the other thing that became very apparent in this story is just their friendship. And if you know anything about Brian Piccolo, after Sayers injured his knee, Piccolo helped him get ready for the 1968 season. In July of 1969, Piccolo went to get a normal checkup and returned to backing up Gayle Sayers. After taking himself out of the game because he wasn't feeling well, you could see he had an x-ray done that showed he had a rare form of cancer. It's called embryonal cell carcinoma. And I'm not even going to pronounce it, as a mediastinal teratoma. I say that 10 times fast. But you see that in just four short months, Piccolo developed a tumor the size of a grapefruit. Now that tumor was operated on, it was removed. Piccolo was not only thinking about, coming back, but coming back to play. But eventually there was a time where it looked like, you saw Piccolo fought this terrible disease, and after many surgeries, it looked like he would beat cancer. Well, it came back, and it came back with a vengeance. And so what you saw at the tail end is not only when they thought he wasn't going to come back to the Bears, but that he didn't have that much longer to live. And the story is Ed McCaskey, who was the Bears chairman at that time, the McCaskey-Hollis family. He visited Brian, and he kind of broke down at his bedside. And Brian, just in his humorous, joking nature all the way up into his dying days, told him, "Don't worry, Big Ed. I'm not afraid of anything. Only Packers linebacker Ray Nitschke, the Hall of Fame linebacker." But unfortunately, after a long, tough battle, Piccolo lost his fight to cancer on June 16th, 1970, at the young age of 26. And so you saw this friendship that developed between Brian and Gayle, a friendship that helped each other through adversity. Whether it was Gayle Sayers rehabilitating and come back from an injury at that time, not only a season-ending injury, but a career-ending injury. Him being able to come back from this injury so significant. Or Brian Piccolo obviously fighting with the toughest fight that you could do, is he was fighting for his life. And so this story is chronicled in a movie called Brian Song. And so what you could see, it was in Brian Song in 1971. It was re-released 40 years later in 2001. The movie focused on the strong relationship between Piccolo and Sayers, and it mainly focused on when Piccolo was in the hospital. And this movie really showcased how Piccolo and Sayers' relationship shattered racial boundaries. And you can see that. And so what I'm going to do, I will play this video. And I know I said I wouldn't play the videos, but as I'm going through this, I was like, I really want to show this end part. And it's really because I think it's a great way to close, because, obviously there's always Hollywood elements to a story, and things that are filled in and creative lines, but it still stays true to the story and the friendship between Brian and Gayle. But this was an actual speech that Gayle Sayers said verbatim when he won the comeback player, the George S. Hallis Most Courageous Player Award. And let's listen to this.
I'd like to say a few words about a guy I know, a friend of mine. His name is Brian Piccolo, and he has the heart of a giant, and that rare form of courage which allows him to kid himself and his opponent. Cancer. He has a mental attitude which makes me proud to have a friend who spells out courage 24 hours a day, every day of his life. And you flatter me by giving me this award. But I say to you here and now, Brian Piccolo is the man of courage who should receive the George S. Hallis Award. He's mine tonight, and Brian Piccolo's tomorrow. I love Brian Piccolo, and I'd like all of you to love him too. And tonight, hit your knees. Please ask God to love him.
Okay. All right. So you see, that part gets me every time. You just see the story of the friendship and the love. Now, what happened since that moment? Obviously, Gayle Sayers has gone on to be an amazing career afterwards. As we talked about, he's the youngest player ever to get inducted, University of Kansas, until he became the athletic director of Southern Illinois. He started his own business in '84 as a computer supply technology consulting firm in Chicago. In 2009, joined the University of Kansas Athletic Department as a director of fundraising for special projects. Brian Piccolo, there was an established right after he passed away by his friends, family, and teammates, the Brian Piccolo Cancer Research Fund. You can go to that website and look that up, and you can see what they're still involved in. And it supports cancer research initiatives that help improve the care for patients in Brian Piccolo's honor. The fund has committed more than $8.3 million to the development of improved diagnostic tools and more effective treatments. Each year, now think about this, each year the Chicago Bears give out a Piccolo Award. So he's still being honored even to today, and that's given out every year. You can go to the Bears website and see who those players are. And they give it out to a veteran and a rookie player of the team. Now this goes to a player who best exemplifies courage, loyalty, teamwork, dedication, and as I said earlier, you see that last part, and a sense of humor. And you see that's what Brian Piccolo maintained up until his dying days, and a story that we love to share here about them. So about them too. And so what can we learn from this story? What character traits can you learn from these athletes? How are these traits important in everyone's life? And there's so many ways we could go in talking with students here today. I'm going to kind of just go in a nutshell here today. Is number one, you saw the commitment, you saw the determination, you saw the dedication, you saw the integrity, you saw the courage, all those character qualities that you saw in their story. But to me, the big story behind this is friendship and brotherhood and love and unity. And there's all kinds, when we get into the program with students, there's a lot of different ways we go with this, but I just want to conclude with this, just in a little bit of time we have left, is one of the beautiful things about this story is that what football teaches is that when you go through trials in life, when you go through adversity, and we are as a country going through trials, we are as a country going through adversity. We're going through a struggle right now. And what I want, especially our young people to understand, and even adults right now that are connected, and I'm 42 years old, I need reminded of this as well, that when I get knocked down in life, what football teaches is that not only when you get knocked down, you get back up. Obviously, you hear the saying, you get knocked down, you get back up. But the thing to understand is that in football, what it teaches is that typically when you get knocked down, who's there to pick you back up? Your teammates. And I want to encourage everybody, young and old, and in between, is that you don't have to go at this alone, especially young people. Sometimes, especially right now, we're isolated. We're told to stay home. We're not around our friends. We're not around other people that care for us, and we're being isolated a little bit. But what I want you to know is that you don't have to go through issues in life by yourself. And especially as young people, sometimes you think, man, I feel like I'm all by myself. No one understands this. What I can tell you is that you have parents at home that love you. And maybe for some families, maybe you don't have a parents. Maybe you come from a broken home. I don't know what the situations that we're speaking to here today. Maybe it's a grandparent. Maybe it's a best friend's parents. Maybe it is your best friend. Maybe it's an older brother or sister. Maybe it's your coach in sports. Maybe it's your band director or choir director. Maybe it's your teacher. Maybe it's your guidance counselor. Maybe it's your pastor. Maybe it's your youth pastor. What I want to encourage you is that you don't have to go at things alone. And that when you get knocked down, be willing to extend a hand up, to ask for help, to understand that you can't always do this by yourself. We're not meant to carry the load by ourselves. We're meant to have a team in life, whether that's in the classroom, whether that's in sports, whether that's just in everyday life. We're meant to function as teams. And what we need to realize as teams is sometimes we have to be willing to say, man, I'm hurting, and I really need some help. And I know that's a tough thing sometimes for people to say, especially as men, to ask for help. And I can tell you in my life that I have benefited from is that I've had outstanding people in my life, best friends, pastors, other people in my life, parents, an older brother, all these people that have spoken in my life, that when I went through trials in life, is that I didn't just get back up and say, I'm going to just do this myself. I said, man, I'm hurting right now, and I need help. I need someone to talk to. I need someone to walk with. And so being willing to that, but then in turn, being willing to be that person for somebody else. I've also been that person, even though I've received that love and that tenderness and that listening ear when I needed to, but I have also been that person for other people to say, man, I saw you got knocked down. Come here, let's get back up. And a lot of times you don't have to have the great words of advice or anything like that. Sometimes you just need to be there to listen and say, I hear you, man. And I'm going to be here with you. I'll cry with you. I'll put my arm around you. I don't know how to take away the pain that you're going through, what you're enduring, but I'm just going to put my arm around you and say, I love you, and I'll walk with you. And that's the beautiful thing. And that's what I believe football teaches so beautifully. And that's what I believe that story of Brian Piccolo and Gayle Sayers teaches so beautifully, is people that are just willing to put their arms around each other and say, I'm going to walk this life with you. And so I love this. One of my favorite programs to do because of the storyline behind it, because Brian and Gayle, the personalities, all those things. But again, I see we're getting to the end of the program. So if you want to tune in and connect to one of these teachers, parents, let your teachers know. This program is available that we do on a 50 to 60-minute interactive version, whether it's on a field trip, whether it's over a video conference broadcast. Email us to find out more information about it at education@profootballhof.com. We appreciate each and every one of you guys connecting here with us today. Take care, and God bless you.